Hi there! A new season of everyone's favorite game mode is upon us, this time featuring the boss Tusk Beasteel. Its attribute weaknesses will be Hydra and Freeze, while Physical and Freeze will receive seasonal platoon buffs. In this video, I'll first cover the boss's mechanics, after which we'll go over suggested team setups for our current global roster. Now, this boss is somewhat of a bullet sponge, with 11.6 million HP, 175 stability and a bit over 8k defense. Like most bosses, it enjoys 80% damage reduction while its stability is above 0. Damage bonuses in this fight are quite meager, with only a minor attack buff and no free defense reduction. That said, at the start of battle, the boss applies a 10% attack bonus to the nearest and farthest target from itself. The positions in front and behind the boss are the closest, with the priority for the one behind. From the diagonal tiles, the one on the lower left is considered furthest from the boss. With this setup, Voymastina and Yoohee receive the attack buff, here called Hunt Mark. This buff has no duration, but can be dispelled by the boss via one of its skills. The boss's abilities unfold in a 3-turn cycle. The first round doesn't have anything interesting going on. The boss makes a total of 3 attacks, which all deal burn damage, and create lava tiles around their targets in a 3x3 AoE. The first basic attack is targeted at the nearest opponent, here dealing 1 damage to Voymastina, who enjoys 80% damage reduction with a stability above 0. The next 2 attacks deal AoE damage and target the dolls with Hunt Mark. If there are none with the buff, it targets the nearest and farthest dolls instead. As you can see, all of the attacks create lava tiles. Ending your turn on one of these applies a dot for 2 turns, which deals 20% of the boss's attack as fixed damage. On round 2, the boss starts again with its basic attack, targeted at the nearest opponent. Then, it launches an AoE attack that deals damage and knocks back all characters within 4 tiles of itself, while also applying Shackled, which inhibits movement. You don't gain anything from dispelling Shackled, but some characters like Alred or Kluke need to be able to move to use their abilities. You also need movement to interact with the boss's next mechanic. Note that Voymastina is immune to movement inhibition and displacement, so she does not care whatsoever. The attack will also grant a 30% damage bonus for 2 turns, here called Caged Beast. Therefore, you generally want to group up all your damage dealers in front of the boss by the end of your second turn. Here, everyone except for Yoohee receives the buff. The boss uses this ability on round 2 and 5, so this bonus is active on the 2 following rounds, namely 3, 4, 6 and 7. After the knockback, the boss launches another single target attack, this time directed at the doll with the lowest HP, dealing freeze damage and applying defense down 2. It concludes the turn by creating warning tiles outside of the center of the battlefield. The skill takes effect on the next round. Importantly, you want your 2 characters with Hunt Mark to be in range for this attack. Once the boss starts its 3rd turn, the skill activates, dealing AoE burn damage around the field and creating more lava tiles underneath affected targets. Before the tiles are created, characters with Hunt Mark have the buff dispelled, which grants everyone on the team a stack of 15% bonus damage, here called Horn of Counterattack. This stacks up to twice, 1 stack per dispelled Hunt Mark, for 30% bonus in total. As noted, lava tiles are created afterwards, and the boss concludes the turn with 2 more of its AoE burn attacks. At the end of the round, Hunt Mark is applied once more to the nearest and farthest doll. This occurs every time after the buff was dispelled, but only if no one with the buff remains. Thus, on round 3 and 6, you need to ensure that both characters with Hunt Mark are in the warning tile area and that they receive the attack buff afterwards by being the closest and farthest from the boss respectively. Note that you don't need to have all characters in the warning tile area to receive the team-wide damage buff. If you want the same 2 characters to repeatedly gain Hunt Mark, it's easier that way though. Here, only Diane and Voymastina take the hits. However, Alred now takes over the attack buff from Diane. This is fine when you have comparable damage dealers on the team. In that case, you only need to make sure that your main carry is the farthest from the boss, which doesn't require much thinking. On round 4, you can see that Voymastina has Hunt Mark and 2 stacks of Horn of Counterattack, which lasts for 2 turns. She is also still affected by the 30% bonus from Caged Beast for this round. Consequently, the amplification is highest on round 4 and 7, with 10% bonus attack for 2 damage dealers and a total of 60% bonus damage for everyone, assuming you engage with the mechanics. Frankly, that's not a lot, so as noted at the outset, this boss is pretty much a DPS check. In summary, there's very little to keep track of. At the start of battle, position your dolls so that your two best damage dealers are the closest and farthest from the boss to receive Hunt Mark. Then, on round 2 and 5, you want to move everyone that contributes damage in front of the boss for the knockback attack. This grants 30% bonus damage for 2 turns. Bring debuff cleansing to dispel shackles so that you can position your dolls as needed. On round 3 and 6, you need to move the 2 dolls with Hunt Mark into the warning tile area so that their Hunt Mark is dispelled for the team-wide 30% bonus damage. When doing so, make sure that the new Hunt Mark goes to the correct targets at the end of that round, which again chooses the nearest and farthest dolls from the boss. Now that we know the mechanics, let's talk team building. Since there isn't a lot of amplification happening in this fight, your strongest options will typically involve the physical core, most notably Yoohee and Voymastina. The physical damage dealers are well suited for bosses with high defense and little buffs, as they are simply bypassing the enemy's defense while gaining plenty of bonus damage in the process. The currently strongest setup features the physical and corrosion cores. Cluke and Lin provide more defense reduction for Voymastina, while also contributing a decent amount of damage by themselves. Since the boss is not weak to corrosion, you'll also want to include Michti. This will convert Voymastina's AoE support action to corrosion damage, making her lose the defense penetration bonus. That works out for Cluke though, since she needs to recharge enough Confectance points to reset her ultimate's cooldown. To ensure that Cluke has it available every turn, you'll have to equip her fixed key Strong Support. Ideally, both Cluke and Voymastina should be V6, one of them borrowed. If you have neither at V6, you need at least a V3 Cluke to make this work. The order in which the characters appear on screen corresponds to the action order within a turn, which you can also use for autoplay setup. You may end up having to swap Lin's and Cluke's action sequence on one of the turns if Cluke's ultimate is not yet off its cooldown. To prevent this from happening for autoplay, you should also equip Deadly Entwine. Alternatively, if you have now the twice buffed Diane and Ulrid, you can go for a monophysical setup. Faye or QJ without her expansion key can be used as placeholders until Lainey is released. The order in which Diane and Ulrid act is interchangeable, unless one is more invested than the other. Next, since this season buffs freeze damage, you may also see decent results from mixing the physical and freeze cores. Alva and Robella really only need each other to function, though Robella should be highly invested, preferably V6, to make this worthwhile. You can bring Macchiato as another damage dealer, or if she's not invested, use one of Diane or Ulrid instead. If you've used Yoohee on your other team, you can slot into Shevnaya for a quasi-mono freeze team, in which Voymastina would simply be a strong flex pick for the 5th slot. Then, the electric team doesn't mind having Voymastina by their side. Again, this team makes most sense when you have one V6 of your own, either Lever or Voymastina, so that you can borrow the other. You could also replace Andorus with Yoohee, which will improve Voymastina's damage and provide more stability damage for the electric core. You won't get the negative charge application from Andorus' turrets though, so Lever will have to use her fixed key for likely suboptimal timing of her support actions. If you do bring Yoohee, she can switch her turn order with Jiangyu. Then, even the somewhat outdated Hydro Core will function in a mixed setup with Yoohee and Voymastina. As with the freeze setup, you can bring either Nikita or use one of Diane and Ulrid instead. It simply depends on your investment. Assuming all are V0, I suggest using one of the physical damage dealers, as they are currently very competitive with their 2 expansion keys. Lastly, let's not forget about the classic Burn Core. While it ranks lowest of the available mixed physical setups, it's still viable enough to clear this Gunsmoke fight, assuming sufficient investment. Again, you can replace Sharkry with one of the physical damage dealers if you have them at your disposal. But enough of the physical characters. Since you need to assemble at least 2 teams, let's also briefly address some strong alternatives. If your platoon has a V6 Lewis, or perhaps you invested into one yourself, she works best alongside the Hydro Core. Preferably, Nikita should be V1 for the extra action, so that you get more volley fires off. If you have Sakura, you can also replace Vector for more Ember stacking, or boot Nikita, assuming she's just V0. Next, you can run a classic mono-burn team around a V6 Chiwa. Depending on your other investment levels, Perry can replace Sakura, though you lose out on Ember stacks, and Lewis can be used instead of QJ or Sharkry, especially at higher investment. Finally, a mixed lineup of Corrosion and Hydro dolls still works well if you meet the required investment levels. Instead of Yoohee and Voymastina, you're now pairing the Corrosion core with Springfield and Turlo. At the very least, Cluke should be V6. For sufficient Confectance gain to have Cluke's ultimate available every turn, you will need a V3 or higher Springfield to unlock her support actions, or a V6 Lin for 2 corrosion attacks each turn. You'll need to equip Deadly Entwine either way, and strong support if you're counting on Springfield support actions. After the initial turn, it's fine for Lin and Cluke to swap their action order around, so that Lin's corrosion attacks help lower Cluke's cooldown. That should do it for this one. As you can see, most setups benefit from having more than just one V6 character. Don't worry though if you don't have one of your own. Unless you're in a top ranked platoon, participation is the main prize, even if you just autoplay your way through. I'll leave you with this overview of the suggested setups. As noted, the order of the characters corresponds to the action sequence, going from left to right. You can use this for autoplay setup as well. In any case, I wish you the best of luck in obtaining a personal high score. Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.